Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. And it's great to be with you on this Labor Day Monday 2020. And Labor Day Monday means one thing it means it's time to turn the calendar. We're into football season. Thursday night, we have a game. And tonight, I have a huge draft. And believe a lot of you who play fantasy football, you're getting ready to draft or you already have. I wish you had watched this show before you drafted. I got a few things to talk about this morning that are very important, a couple of positions. But I want to talk about, first of all, the overall theory of maximizing value. That's the key to success in your NFL draft. I don't think typically you win a draft with your first or second round pick. You could lose a draft with your first or second round pick, but I don't think you typically win one with that. I think you win your draft when you get into the 8th through maybe the 13th or 14th rounds, and who you can pick there, get that value. So I want to go through some players with you. The first segment today, after I give you a little intro, Tar Heel of the day, Eric Ebron, beat writer out of Pittsburgh, is saying that Eric Ebron, tight end now for the Steelers, is being used in every play all over the field. And because of how well Ebron has been playing, the Steelers, they elected to go with only 5 receivers on their team, which is usually you go with 6 or 7. They went with 5, and that's because of the role they feel Ebron will play in the Steelers' offense this year. And we all know tight end is a tough position. It's not very deep. Maybe 5 or 6, volume guys at that position. But Eric Ebron, the former Tar Heel, former Detroit Lion, former Indianapolis Colt, he is a player to watch later in your draft, talking about maximizing value. We just had a comment about CeeDee Lamb. I was in a draft last week, and it was an 18 league. Now, the draft I'm in tonight is a 14. That's right, 14-team league. And so every pick that I wanted scripted, I got. I've never done that in any draft. And my last pick in the draft was CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, slot receiver, gotten a lot of hype in the preseason. I think he's going to be a great talent. We'll see. Another comment in the room now is Big Ben is back healthy. That's true. We're going to talk about some Steeler receivers. I don't want to spend the whole show talking about the Steelers, but we'll talk about them some. Eric Ebron, the tight end. We're going to talk about their wide receivers. There is Deontay is a great option at wide receiver for the Steelers. Let's talk about quarterback values first, though, this morning. And there are 2 that I want to talk about from different perspectives. First, I want to talk about a rookie, and we don't usually look at rookies, early in drafts. But I think Joe Burrow, quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, look, in the draft this year, the Bengals do a couple of things. Yeah, they get Burrow number 1 overall, no doubt. That was their lottery, if you will, pick. But the Bengals also then invest a lot in offensive linemen to protect Burrow, to protect Joe Mixon. I think Mixon's going to be a great play this year in fantasy, coming out of the backfield, running the ball, coming out of the backfield, catching passes. I think he's going to be a dump down a lot for Burrow. But Burrow is going to be in a low-key, high-volume passing offense. Okay? Last season, head coach Zach Taylor for the Bengals had the Bengals playing fast and tossing the ball at will. Now, Cincinnati last year, same head coach this year, was 9th in plays per game and passing rate. So since 2016, only Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Dak Prescott have finished as top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy as rookies. Now, the reason I think Burrow falls in that, not only is he a really talented quarterback, but he's got a lot of players around him who are talented. I've already mentioned Joe Mixon. You got Gio Bernard, former Tar Heel. There you go. A.J. Green, John Ross, and Tyler Boyd. And here's a great mix and match for you. If you're drafting and you can match Joe Burrow and Tyler Boyd, that's a great tandem in fantasy for 2020. Another quarterback, I'm going to mention 4 here. And some of these you're like, I don't know. But Carson Wentz. Now, I see the arrow pointing up for Carson Wentz. Last year, Wentz was a quarterback 10 in total points. And despite playing with basically a practice squad of players down the stretch, he was throwing the ball, hooking up for points. This season, the Eagles insulate the depth chart with speed. They've got Jalen Reagor, who I think is a great fantasy pick this year. John Hightower, Quez Watkins. They also traded for Marquise Goodwin during the draft. So now when you add Jalen Reagor and the others to what Carson Wentz has to work with, Wentz now has some real weapons that aren't practice squad fodder. He played top 10 fantasy 2017. He was QB3 that year. We know he's had injuries, but he's not only got these new receivers, he's also got Zach Ertz, Miles Sanders, and Deshaun Jackson, who gets hurt a lot. At some point this year, Deshaun Jackson will get hurt, but the word out of Eagles camp is that Deshaun Jackson has beefed up and now ready to assume a major role in that Eagles offense. Carson Wentz, Joe Burrow. How about Teddy Bridgewater for the Carolina Panthers? Now remember, fantasy differs from reality. The Panthers have the 32nd ranked defense in the NFL. There are 32 teams in the NFL. So what that means is the Panthers, coming into the season, have the worst ranked defense in the entire NFL. They host the Raiders in week 1. I think the Raiders make mincemeat of the Panthers. Now he's reuniting with Joe Brady in Carolina. Joe Brady worked for the Saints in 2018, Teddy Bridgewater is. And the reason I mention their defense being so poor is I see the Panthers throwing the ball a lot more down the field. Now, we know the number 1 overall pick is going to probably be a Panther, but I see his role a little less this year. I think the Panthers throw the ball down the field to their wide receivers and tight ends more. Now, Bridgewater worked with Joe Brady in 2018 with the Saints. Brady worked with Bridgewater during part of his time in New Orleans and then helping guide LSU to an offensive juggernaut there. Brady will now try to wave a magic wand with the Panthers. But despite their, large percentage every game the Panthers are going to be behind. That's right. And Brady's system should really fit Bridgewater really well. Last year, Bridgewater's deep ball had been questioned, but his short area accuracy shouldn't be. So with the likes of DJ Moore, the likes of Christian McCaffrey, the number 1 pick in the draft in most drafts, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, what I'm getting at is he's got some offensive weapons there other than just one named McCaffrey. And I think he's going to spread the ball around. They're going to be behind. And therefore, I think Teddy Bridgewater is a really good value pick at quarterback. Here you go. Another one, and I'm going to do 5 quarterbacks this morning. Gardner Minshew for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, he's not a top 10 quarterback, okay? But he's a running quarterback. And he's got some pretty good receivers in Jacksonville. They added, Josh Oliver's healthy, Tyler Eifert's healthy, Laviska Shenault is explosive, and I think Shenault is a great late round pick. They're going to be behind again. The Jags are not very good. They're going to have a losing record. They're going to throw the ball a lot. And in fantasy, that's what you want. You want quarterbacks who throw the ball a lot. You want two things. They throw the ball a lot and they score a lot of points. I'm not sure about the points, but I know he's going to throw the ball a lot. So there's 4 quarterbacks. And then I want to go to one more place. I want to go to Miami, if I can, for just a moment. And the reason I want to go to Miami is, we know that they draft Tua, and we know that Tua is probably going to be a late round, late season, mid-season pickup or add at starting quarterback for the Fish. But until that happens, they've got Ryan Fitzpatrick, who over the last 4 years, when he has started games, 23 games, he has been a QB1 61% of the time. 61% of the time, he has been a QB1. I'm not saying he is a great season-long play, because I think Tua comes in around Thanksgiving, November 1st. But until then, look, the Dolphins aren't going to run the ball a lot. They're going to throw the ball down the field. Sure, he's going to throw some interceptions, but I think he is going to be a fantasy asset, a late round pick again. And that's what I'm looking for this morning, trying to maximize value. Now, let's talk about running back. Melvin Gordon, former Los Angeles Charger, now current Denver Bronco. He's going to be the workhorse in that Denver backfield. I think Philip Lindsay drops to second fiddle on the Denver Broncos. Gordon is a pass-catching, running back. He has a top 10 cap among all running backs in each of the last 2 seasons. Denver's new offensive coordinator, Pat Schumer, has finished top 6 in 7 of his last 11 years in touch share with running backs. Gordon did show down the stretch last year there's reason to believe he still has gas in the tank. He started the season slowly for the Chargers after holding that. Remember, he held contract, held out. He had 2.5 yards per carry, 2.3 yards per target in weeks 5 through 8. But then beginning in weeks 9 through 17, his yards per carry rose from 2.5 to 4.2, and his yards per target increased from 2.3 to 6.6. Still has a lot of talent. He was 6th in yards per touch and 3rd in yards created per touch in 2018. I look for Gordon to be a great fantasy player, great fantasy asset this year. Let's look at some questions you've got, and let's see here. So I got one person right in going to pick Bengals, Jags, and Dolphins heavy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying these 3 players are valued picks. And then the next question, should I throw in some Jets? And the answer is absolutely not. Let's look at David Johnson, if you will, running back for the Houston Texans. And, he fame, rose to glory in Arizona, then got hurt. He was the RB7 in PPR scoring in 2019. First 5 weeks of 2019, rather. Then he just looked washed up. He really did. He looked washed up. Over the first 5 weeks, he was averaging 4.1 yards per carry, 7.48 yards per target. And his 7.48 yards per target would have ranked him 12th over the entire season. But then he had a back strain in week 5, ankle sprain in week 6, and he was never the same the rest of the season. In fact, after week 6 last year, David Johnson never played more than 43% of the snaps in any remaining game. But now, this year, he's with the Houston Texans. in a new lineup, being drafted as a mid to low end RB2. Now, provided he stays healthy, that's the key. Provided DJ stays healthy, his numbers from early last year could be a floor to what he can do for the Houston Texans. Now, remember, Houston has an offensive line that was a top 12 run blocking line in 2019. Houston was 12th in rushing attempts last season. So, volume is there for David Johnson. Blocking is there for David Johnson. And if he can stay healthy, that's the big IF. If he can stay healthy, then he's a dark horse candidate for comeback player of the year. Another running back, my third one, talking about volume being king. And, I've talked about in baseball, football, the same thing. I want a player who's going to get the opportunity. Whoever's going to get the opportunity has a really good shot of being successful in the NFL. So let's talk about David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. Now, Montgomery was 12th in touches among all running backs last season. He was 13th in juke rate, evading tackles. He is a runner that's going to lean heavily on his upfront blocking. And the big problem with the Bears' offensive line was that they were a bottom 5 unit. So their run blocking is not improved on paper, but Montgomery has some positive factors working in his favor other than the O-line. First of all, he's not going to be challenged on early downs by any other running back. The Bears only have another player named Ryan Nall, and Artavius Pierce behind Montgomery, and neither one of them are challenging Montgomery for touches on early downs. So that's one thing in Montgomery's favor. The arrival of Nick Foles at quarterback. Now, I know there's talk about Foles not starting week 1. Mitch Trubisky will be the starter week 1, it looks like, for Chicago. But I think if Trubisky succeeds and he stays there, that only helps Montgomery. If he fails and Foles comes in, that helps Montgomery. So Foles has this immobility that can open up some check down passes for Montgomery. And in full point or half point PPR, that makes him even more valuable. Last year, for example, with Nick Foles under center, Leonard Fournette saw his target share passing increase from 15 to 21%. So if Montgomery can see a similar increase in pass catching ability and opportunities, it makes him a more interesting and valuable fantasy asset. Now, I know Tariq Cohen's going to get some targets in this offense, but if Tariq Cohen, who was not explosive last year, doesn't regain that explosiveness, it only adds more weight to why you should pick up David Montgomery for the Bears. So I think Montgomery is screaming out loud in value, and I think he's a player that you need to take. Let's talk about wide receivers. Let's go to the left bank, Robert Woods. Robert Woods, Woods, 3 years as a Ram. He's never finished outside the top 20 in PPR fantasy points per game. Over those last 3 years, he was wide receiver 19 in 2017, wide receiver 16 in 2018, and wide receiver 13 last year. Despite missing a game last year, he still not sure what happened. I guess we're back. We're talking about Robert Woods. PPR, last 3 years, wide receiver 19, 16, and 13. 13 last year. And despite missing one game last year, he still set career new highs in targets with 139 targets and in receptions with 90. Now, I don't think the Rams defense, from everything I've read, got any better in the offseason. So I don't expect the passing to slow down, which is another reason why you also might want to look at their quarterback. That's right. But right now I'm talking about Robert Woods and McVay's system. So I think Woods is in every play, on every snap. If his touchdown count could increase, he only had 2 last year, then he really could be a value pick in this draft. Another wide receiver that I want you to keep your eye on is Michael Gallup, wide receiver, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, last year was Gallup's sophomore season, and he was wide receiver 18 across the whole league. He joined Tyreek Hill, Odell Beckham Jr., Allen Robinson, and Courtland Sutton as the only second-year wide receivers in the last 5 years to surpass 1,100 receiving yards. And he had an 8.9 yards per target and 6 touchdowns. Now, I know the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb. Okay, but they've got Gallup. And though Gallup may be capped a little bit by Lamb, I think Gallup will still reprise his role as Dak Prescott's go-to guy. You know, Amari Cooper had some really good games for the Cowboys, and then there were games where he didn't show up. And he was the same way with the Raiders. Really good games mixed in with some I didn't show up games. Gallup shows up every game. And I just wonder how long it may be before the trust of Dak Prescott totally vests in Gallup and not so much in Amari Cooper. Now, I think they'll be passing aplenty. I hate to say it, but I think the defense, who lost Robert Quinn, they lost Byron Jones. They're going to start the year with a couple of linebackers on the IL, I understand. Dallas was 9th in passing while trailing last year. So Gallup, to me, makes plenty of sense as a wide receiver that can be drafted as a wide receiver 3 and offers wide receiver 2 production. There you go. Let's talk about tight end. Just trying to give you some players. I'm not sure if you're drafting tonight. Here's some tight ends to think about. And these are late rounders. Again, I'm not talking about going to Kansas City and getting a tight end. I'm going down the line here, okay? All right. First of all, Miami. I've already told you Fitzpatrick's going to throw the ball a lot. Miami has a tight end named Mike Gesicki. And Gesicki, he lined up last year 17% of the time as a wide receiver. Okay? So he is a primary receiving tight end. He basically stinks as a blocker. Great receiver, though. And look what Chan Daly has done. He's funneled his passing attacks through 2 main cogs. During his last stop with the Jets, that was Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, or Quincy Enunwa. No doubt, Devontae Parker will probably lead the Dolphins in receptions this year. I don't have a doubt on that. But the slot component in 2020 will be Gesicki. He was 4th last season in yards at tight end, only behind Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, and Mark Andrews. So I think Gesicki has a 2019 Darren Walker-esque season in range of outcomes for 2020. So yes, maybe we do pick up a Dolphin, and I think Gesicki could be a great value at tight end. Another potential good value at tight end, I love Jonnu Smith, tight end for the Tennessee Titans. Now, he's the clear-cut starter to start at tight end for the Titans. He was a dynamic player last year. He was 11th in yards per pass route and 9th in yards after catch. Tennessee, well, they don't have to really change a lot here. Smith was a top 12 tight end at season's end. And in Tannehill's 10 starts, Smith was the tight end 13 despite only 3.6 targets per game. So it's what he does after the catch. He's an explosive tight end, fast runner. And I think Jonnu Smith, again, is a really good player to look for late as a tight end. Now, I mentioned Jalen Reagor earlier for the Philadelphia Eagles. I want to talk about a few rookies for just a moment. Reagor was a reach, I think, in the draft at 21 overall, but he's one of the draft's most electric players. He probably is comparable explosiveness-wise to Henry Ruggs for the Las Vegas Raiders. And despite some size limitations, he has a great leaping ability, great speed, played outside at TCU predominantly. And I think when he teams with Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey has health concerns. I think Reagor could be a high volume, very high volume tight end. Question about where do I rate Ebron among tight ends? Well, let's take a look at that for just a moment. You've got to look at all of the tight ends who are out there. And as I look at the tight end, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz, and Walker, to me, are your top 5 tight end options. Okay? I like Noah Fant for Denver. I like Hunter Henry for the Chargers. I like Tyler Higbee. I like Hayden Hurst. I think Ebron, for me, is the 12th tight end. That's where I rank him. But 12th tight end means I can get him late in drafts. How will Ebron rate up against the elite? Well, he's not going to have the numbers of a Kelsey or a Kittle, okay? But from reading the beat writers, and that's what I think you need to do when you're looking at your fantasy teams, go research what the beat writers are saying about the different teams who follow the teams at practice every day. And when we look at Ebron being used at all over the field in every play formation, Big Ben trusting him, the Steelers not carrying extra wide receivers because of the role that Ebron is going to play in the offense, I've got him as tight end 12. Who's after him? Well, I got Gesicki at 13. I just talked about him. I think there's a lot of value late at tight end. You're going to see some teams in your leagues go draft Kelsey in the first and second round. I'm not saying that's a bad move. Kelsey's a great player. But I think you can go pick up a more valuable wide receiver or running back early, pass on Kelsey, get a Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Mike Gorecki, Ebron later in drafts. You'll still get points. And face it, there are going to be games where Kansas City, outside of games maybe with teams like, I don't know, Oakland or Denver, they're probably going to try to run the ball a little more then. But you're going to have games where Kansas City's not passing the ball as much. I think those AFC West contests this year will be highly contested, grind out kind of games. So and 8 of their games are against AFC West. I mean, the Raiders are better. I think the Broncos are better. The Chargers defense is pretty good. So it's going to be an interesting thing how those top flight tight ends compare to your tight end 8, tight end 9, tight end 10. That's it. Well, while I'm on the Steelers talking about their tight end, I'd like to look at their wide receiver situation. You know, we got Juju Smith-Schuster as their number 1 guy, okay? And there's no doubt that Juju will be ranked as number 1. But a sneaky pick at wide receiver in Pittsburgh is Deontay Johnson. And everything I'm reading out of Pittsburgh is that in practice, Big Ben is looking for Deontay Johnson on pass plays. Now, when he's doing that in practice, that would infer to me Big Ben is going to be also doing that in games. Deontay Johnson, in my chart, I've got him at wide receiver 49. Now, why do I bring that up? Because wide receiver is a lot deeper than you think. Okay? You got Golden Tate at wide receiver 52. Henry Ruggs, wide receiver 56. Larry Fitzgerald for Arizona. They're going to throw the ball a lot this year. I know he's now their number 2 wide receiver, but he's wide receiver 60. And I mentioned Chenault for Jacksonville, who I really like. Very fast receiver. He's wide receiver 69 on my list. But going up from there, we talked about Michael Gallup, wide receiver 33. I mean, wide receiver 33, Michael Gallup, to me, that is a great value. He will have big numbers. I think his numbers may rival someone like Adam Thielen. And Adam Thielen's wide receiver 13. I like Michael Gallup better than Deontay Johnson, but not a lot better. How's that? I think Deontay Johnson will put up some catches. I'm going to predict Deontay Johnson has 70 catches this year. 70. And in that Steeler offense, as wide open as it is, it could even be more. Gallup will catch a few more balls than that. But there are a lot of mouths to feed in Dallas. Those wide receivers are really good. And you know Zeke Elliott's going to catch 6 to 10 balls a game as well. Dallas is going to run the ball to Zeke Elliott. So what I'm getting at is, with all the mouths to feed, Deontay Johnson could actually, I can see a scenario where he's a 1,000-yard receiver and he gets more opportunity, more targets than Gallup. The key with Gallup, I think, is what he does after the catch. I think Gallup, having 2 years under his belt, will be an explosive wide receiver, yards after catch. But I like both of those guys, and there's some others that I like as well. I don't have time to talk about this morning, but there's some really good sneaky picks at wide receiver this year in the draft, as well as at tight end. So hopefully what we're doing this morning is of help to you as you go through your draft. I'm going to sign off. I got a draft tonight at 7:30. And so 14-team league. And so tomorrow morning, I'm going to go through that draft with you, let you know how it went, let you know who we got, why we got players where we got them, how we targeted like we did. Everybody has a strategy. Everybody has their list of who you're going after. I've got mine. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Hey, thanks for being with me. Lenny did a great job leading off with baseball. I come back with football. I'm going to give you a different look this morning. Join me tomorrow at 10. We'll talk more about the NFL, and I look for you then. Everybody, have a great day, and thank you for watching here on Lenny Melnick Fantasy Sports, Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. Have a great day.